everyone. I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. But it's all tricks aside, because tonight we're turning the paranormal into the normal. Join me as we explore the gray areas of reality. We're going to talk all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and aliens, and see how it's all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and we are live. So if you're an experiencer yourself, or you're just plain nosy, be sure to send me your question and subscribe to the podcast. Now, get ready, because it's going to get deep. No, really, we're going to go way out there, because this is Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. What's happening, my paranormal junkies? Boy, do we've got a show for you guys tonight, okay? Tonight, we have the Note Troll. Yes, this guy is going to teach us everything we ever wanted to know about remote viewing, all right? And not only is he into remote viewing, but he's also an intuition teacher, yes. So, a super exciting guest tonight. I can't wait to dig right into it. So, guys, let's get a big welcome for Josh Maitland.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, there's so many things, you know, your resume is super impressive. Like I said, we've got remote viewer, and also let's bring this up. Yeah, environmental engineer. He's a musician, and a teacher. He teaches intuition, teaches people how to do these things. So many things I want to cover tonight when we talk. But first, before we get any further, let's hear a little bit. Let the audience know who Josh Maitland is.
Right on. Yeah. So, born and raised here in Canada. I'm up north of Toronto these days. And, my interest in the world of paranormal stuff started very early. I grew up at the time when Ghostbusters was really big.
And that's another ad. Let me add this. I got to say, this was impressive too. Okay. I love Ghostbusters, and I know most of us, all you guys watching, probably love Ghostbusters too. But let me tell you what Josh does. This is how big of a geek Josh is. Josh memorized the whole damn movie.
It was like a channeling thing, man. When I was a kid, I watched it enough times that it would come through me. It just became part of my identity, I suppose. I wanted to grow up and be a Ghostbuster or a wizard or, whatever. And, the closest thing to that I was able to find, at least in my younger days, was music. So, we can get into the connotations of music in psychic abilities later. But, I started playing piano when I was pretty little, probably 6 or 7. And that turned into guitar when I got to high school, just because, it's easier to play in a band with your friends if you're playing guitar. And all the fun things that go with that. And eventually I went off to engineering school. I was always following conspiracies and developments in the world of UFOs as well. I also grew up watching the X-Files, Star Wars, Star Trek, all that stuff, right? So it was plugged into me pretty early, and always something I'd been fascinated about, and a little scared of at times. I'd never had any UFO experiences in my youth. A couple of dreams that were, maybe suspect, but nothing that really blew me away. I did have lots of lucid dreams when I was younger. You could lucid dream when you knew how to do this when you were younger, lucid dream, because that's also something that you have to train yourself to do. Yeah, it happened kind of on its own a bunch of times when I was younger. I started reading about it in high school, about lucid dreaming, near-death experiences, all that kind of stuff, meditation.
Let me ask you this real quick, Josh, because like I said, first of all, there's a lot of super interesting things about you that I think the guests are really going to want to hear and
Thank you.
enjoy. Let's back up to little Josh. Josh was playing the piano. So first of all, any of y'all ever tried to play anything other than chopsticks on the freaking piano? You know, that's hard. And now he's a musician. And then he goes off to engineering school. So not a dumbass. That's good. We've got that covered. All right. Because now let's be honest, you know, for people who, like, we may have some listeners tonight, you know, viewers that are very familiar with remote viewing, and it doesn't seem crazy pants. It seems this is all natural. My paranormal people, you know, but then we have people coming to the channel for the first time and they're like, whoa, take it easy. You know, men that stare at goats, you know, I don't know what's happening here. What's going on? So, you were younger. We could tell you were musically talented. You're a very smart person, you know, engineering background. You've always had this interest in the paranormal, you know, which I think a lot of us, you know, myself included, as a young child. But when did you realize this is something that you could do?
So it kind of started to creep in, I would say, around 2012, and that was probably the first time I had a really paranormal kind of experience. Other than you know, I had a couple of dreams where people I knew had passed came to visit me in dreams, again in childhood. But in 2012, I graduated school. The guys in my band from engineering school, some of them had built this cottage out on an island up north, and you can still find this video online actually. But we recorded a whole album out there on solar power, and there was the lake was called Tilden Lake, and the family that lived there, our bass player at the time, you know, they kind of personified the spirit of the lake as an entity called Bill Tilden. So we wrote this song that was dedicated to Bill Tilden, and you know, we quite honestly created this song and put it down. We had the instrumentals together, but there's never any lyrics. And during the session, my one buddy Cody, he ran off into the woods for a few minutes while we were doing some guitars or whatever, and he started to jot down lyrics, you know, out in nature. And he came back with this crazy story about, you know, how Bill Tilden was this again, we're all environmental guys, right? So Bill Tilden was rising up against the evils of humanity and sending the animals out to battle against, you know, the evil oil companies or whatever it was. And anyway, he handed me this sheet of lyrics that he just pulled down from the universe. I had never seen them before. I just grabbed it, somebody else hit record, and I sang it. And what came out of me was just this absolute channeled. It was the exact right thing for the song. So
right you channeled what he was doing.
Yeah, like we were on the same vibe, and we'd been out there for a week and all together, you know, we were all very close friends too. So we were pretty synchronized in our energy, you know, we're a band. But just being in nature like that, you know, I think
now there was no psychedelics involved, or was, I mean, honestly,
not on this particular day.
Okay.
On this particular day, we you know, we kind of partied the first night as some do, but then, you know, we really got into work and got down to it, because we had about 10 or 12 songs, I can't remember, that we were trying to get down on tape that week. And so this was, I think, day 3. And as we were doing this song too, this crazy dark cloud was forming on the other side of the lake from us. And as we watched it, you know, in between breaks and stuff, it was encircling the whole lake, but there was just enough of a break in the clouds that we still had our solar power right where we were and where we were working, which we all thought was like, oh, that's kind of weird. So then this channeling vocal thing happens, and you know, I saved the file, and I'm like, all right, guys, should we give this a listen? And the moment I said that, the lights just went out, everything was done. I was on battery backup, so I was able to save everything again, just for good measure. And I was like, well, I guess that's a sign, boys. We'll call it a day. So everybody went back up to their bunkhouses, and I stuck around and cleaned up a little bit. And within the kind of 15 minutes, 20 minutes that I was cleaning up, these clouds had moved in. And this is Northern Ontario wilderness darkness. Like, it's dark. And I got outside and I was like, oh man, I can't even see my hand in front of my face. Like, how am I going to find my way to the bunkie? I think it's this way. So I started walking in just the direction I generally knew it was in. And I see these little blue lights on the side of the trail. And I'm like, oh, they must have put some LEDs in here. So I follow the little lights. They're really faint, quite faint. But they got me to where I was going. I found my way, the couple 100 meters up to the bunkie. And I got in. I asked my bass player, hey man, when did you put those trail lights in? And he just says, what trail lights? So I was like, huh, okay. Another bit of weirdness. So we went to bed. Everybody passed out. It had been a big day. We did a lot of work. And I'm not sure when, but a little while later, the rain started from this storm, and it was absolute torrential craziness. It sounded like there was a machine gun coming down on the roof of this bunkie. And so I get up out of bed, and I sit straight up rather. And the song that we'd been working on all day was just lodged in my head immediately. And I asked my buddy Colin down on the other bunk. I'm like, hey man, do you have the song in your head? It was called Rattlesnake at the time, or the Ballad of Bill Tilden. And he's like, yeah. I was like, I think we should go outside. And he was like, yeah. So we hop out of bed, we go outside, and the lightning's crashing, and we both got this song in our head. I start tapping along on the side of the building, and I notice it was a weird time signature, this song. I think it was like 11/7 or something mathy like that. And every time I got back around to the one on the beat, boom, lightning. And this kept going. I was like, I think the lightning is in time with the song in my head. And Colin said the same thing. So we just watched this unfold, and the guys in the other bunkie eventually kind of came outside. We were outside slamming on the walls, and lightning was flashing. And then these little blue orbs started showing up again. And
oh, wow.
They'd kind of pop out of existence out in the woods. And it was just the weirdest, coolest thing I'd ever experienced. It really felt like the spirit of that place had come to support what we were doing, or had resonated with what we had put out there, which was really cool. It was a really cool experience. It was I thought a once in a lifetime thing. And I've since had some other interesting things.
Now, this is okay. First of all, just to make sure we clear this up, there's no way the orbs that you were seeing could have been fireflies or anything like that. I don't know if you guys have fireflies in Canada, correct?
We do, but okay. I mean, I hadn't seen any for the rest of that time I was out there. So
gotcha.
I don't think that's what it was. And the thing that really sends it for me was that in my time of need, in the darkness, these lights showed up and guided me to the bunkie. And it was really weird. And it did really feel like not like UFOs or aliens per se, but certainly nature spirits. Like it was a profound and enlightening experience.
I find interesting, real quick. I want to say real quick, with you being an engineer, I've met a lot of over the years. I'm a professional magician, so when I do my shows, sometimes there's an engineer in the audience, and they'll come up afterwards, and they have thought everything through. And they'll have this crazy explanation of how I did something, even though, yeah, it's interesting. That would work, but you're wrong. But that would work. So the thing I love about you is you've got this engineer brain. So there had to have been some time to where you were, but your mind's also open. Basically, you're a problem solver, and these are the explanations that you've given yourself. So that's why I find that even more credible on your side. Uh,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
got a question right here from our main private UFO paranormal investigator, Ryan Stacy, right here from the TESA network here. He's got a question. Did you know it is common that paranormal experiences and music interconnect, drawing from the ether?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've got Grant Cameron's book. I think it's called Music and the Paranormal, or the Paranormal World of Music, sitting here in my book pile, actually. Yeah, that's super true. And I do have a theory behind that. I can share it with you now if you want.
Absolutely. Let's roll with
Okay.
it.
So and I'm going to get into quantum physics land a little
Oh,
bit
I
here
love that
too.
stuff, dude. I love it.
Okay, so my general theory of reality, I guess you could say, is that the universe itself is a song. The root note being love. That core vibration, that creative energy of the universe that we see in nature, that we see in music, or any kind of creative process, right? And so again, like I felt very compelled to play music from a young age, and it's always been a part of my life. And my intention with music was, I want to do magic, man. Like not stage magic per se. I don't have the dexterity for that, but I can slap a bass all day long with no problem.
Slap at a
Um,
bass.
but yeah, so I think the connection between music and the paranormal is just that, at a quantum physical level, everything is just vibrating energy with information associated with it. So and that information may be that this is made of paper, or that this is a can, or this pen is black and it's located at this particular place in time. But everything has information associated with it, and at a fundamental level, everything solid, or even less material things like thoughts and emotions, all of that is vibration.
Yes.
And yeah, music is just vibration. It's sort of I think one of the coolest things you can do to connect with the universe. When I'm up on stage playing, that's kind of the most tapped in ever that I am. Remote viewing as well. I've noticed a lot of correlation actually when I moved into remote viewing. So I guess I can get back to my story here. After that experience in 2012, I kept working as a recording engineer, civil engineer, environmental engineer, and just playing with new bands, and I didn't really explore the paranormal too much for a while after that, other than keeping up with whatever was happening in UFO news and things like that. And then I think it was 2017. I went to make a course in my studio. I had a buddy from Chicago come up. We booked the weekend off. We booked a film crew. It was this big exciting thing. We had a band from London come up, London, Ontario, that is. And yeah, we were going to just basically shoot the process of recording a song, teach people how to do that. And on the very first night of that session, it was about 9 p.m. and I had this really strong feeling that I needed to go home and check on my dog. It hit me like a brick, and I looked at the time and it was like, oh, it's 8 o'clock. Yeah, I really need to go check on the dog. Like they've been alone for a while, and it was just this crazy thing. So the other guys stuck around the studio for a bit. They were going to do a couple other things, and I headed home. Had to feed them and whatever. And as I got, I'm about 20 minutes away from my studio, so I got about 10 minutes out from home, and that feeling just got really urgent. So I busted it home, and I walked in the door and immediately just felt like something was off. And I found my dog, the older of the two, a golden retriever. He was on the floor, lying there, very ill, not doing good at all. I managed to get him outside, and unfortunately, he passed. But that premonition got me home in time to say goodbye, which I'm very grateful for, as sad as that was. As you can imagine, it completely derailed my project for that week. But yeah, so that was a really crazy experience for me as well, certainly emotionally, but it kind of opened my eyes again to this whole world of psychic ability and premonitions and things like that. So
Well,
again,
when you go back, because a lot of people will, you hear a lot of people tell stories like that. They've got this feeling, something, and something they love, something close to them, something's going on.
yeah,
And I think there most definitely something is. I think a lot of people experience that, or
mhm,
have at least one time in their life had some type of experience like you had with your dog.
yeah,
Um, and I'm with you on the same note that I think a lot of our thoughts, a lot of things are vibrations that are out there. Like you hear people, say positive things, have positive thoughts. And I know the cliche and how corny, you hear it all the time,
yeah.
but I think there's something real to that. You're putting
It's so
positively.
true. There really is a lot to it, because your subconscious mind picks up everything, like
Yes.
everything that you see, smell, taste, any sensory stuff that's going on in your vicinity. Your subconscious is aware of it, but it's screening out, it's filtering out all kinds of crap. Because if you were again, we mentioned psychedelics a little while ago, but when you're taking something like that, it sort of peels the filters back, and you're experiencing more of that wider reality, right? And you can only handle so much of that at a time with your own conscious awareness.
Josh, do you think, like I've heard people say that our consciousness is actually we're a satellite almost?
Yeah, I think it is a lot like that. I think we're capable of receiving any of this information and energy, or at least receiving sort of resonance with that. So again, like an antenna. So if you're we'll use remote viewing as an example. In remote viewing, you are connecting to a target, and for it to technically be remote viewing, you have to be blind to said target. So there's usually a random number associated with the target, whether you task it to yourself or you get it from somebody else. That number is your target. You don't know what it is, but you can intentionally connect to whatever that number represents, and that's how you start your remote viewing session. You write the number, you connect by drawing a little ideogram on your page, and then you start to let that sensory information resonate. And yeah, it is really, I think, a lot like that, where you're receiving that information. And so in the case of my dog, I mean, I imagine you've probably had the experience where you think of somebody, and then you get a phone call or a text from them. Like, everybody's had that, right?
Absolutely.
That's another example of what's called spontaneous PSI. It's psychic connection, non-local perception to something, usually something that has a lot of emotional resonance. So again, if it's somebody you love calling you, or your dog is sick, or whatever it is, those spontaneous moments of psi are essentially your subconscious, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, uh, basically telling you, hey, something's up, pay attention. And it honestly, I've had other incidents where I decided to stop for a break on the highway, and then 10 minutes later, we pass an accident that we probably would have been in if we hadn't stopped, and things like that. It's that spontaneous side is since I've started doing remote viewing, I have a lot more of that, I find.
Now
It opens you up.
I've heard stories where people tell, just like how you mentioned, like the car wreck story. Like, I was driving down the road and something told me to move over in this other lane. Just do it now.
100%.
And they do this, and then they avoid a terrible accident. Something happened, and now, and sometimes people associate this with paranormal, past loved one, someone trying to protect them, or it could be in a situation. It could be somebody 100 miles away, 200 miles away. What's your thoughts on people that's had those kind of experiences? Do you think it's maybe a past loved one that can somehow still? Because also, I want to clear this up too. I'm a firm believer that our loved ones who have passed, moved to the other side, the other realm, wherever they go, can still communicate with us through our satellite, through our antenna.
Yep. I would agree with you 100% on that. I've had some experiences like that myself. And it may very well be like we all, I think outside of, this realm that we're in, and this isn't coming from me, this is stuff I've read and heard from others more so, but linear time doesn't necessarily apply in these other realms, right? So but the energies and information and resonant spirits or entities in those realms can interact with us at any given time. So I think there's probably lots of cases where it probably is protection like that. It's in either case, either way, I think it's your intuition kicking in when that happens. But intuition is basically your gateway to any of that information and any of those entities and any of those spirits. Like it's through your intuitional faculties that kind of stuff can communicate with you. And kind of the more you practice opening that stuff up, the better it's going to work for you. And it's not just crazy stuff like remote viewing, which is kind of like, the strength training of psychic capacity in my opinion. But any creative activity, I think music, for example, kind of works those same muscles, those intuitional muscles. Anything that puts you in flow state and kind of gets you operating your creative faculties, and anytime you're creating, you're essentially channeling that root creative energy of the universe. I think I totally agree. My own opinion, but yeah. So it's your intuitional gateways are I don't know. Are you familiar with the Institute of Heart Math at all?
No. If you can tell me about that.
They're sort of a research group that's kind of looked into a lot of this stuff. They've tested folks with psychic abilities. Another one is the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which was founded by Edgar Mitchell, former astronaut, RIP. And they have a lot of great scientists that explore the scientific nature of channeling and remote viewing and non-local.
It's always been a touchy thing, because people have treated it like a pseudoscience type of stuff or this or that, and which to me I think is really dumb for someone not to take it serious, because I mean it's very well a rational thing. I mean. Our minds, do so much already. And there's so many things like you talk about the creative side, like when you write music and you put this out there and then it's out in the universe, that's affecting other people's energy, other people's thoughts, other people's moods.
100%.
And you could take something as a negative mood and you talk about the vibrations, like the butterfly effect, how that affect the entire world.
Yeah. And I think that's what creativity is. It's like it's this energy that you can channel, and just by putting it out there and taking that action, you can affect things, and maybe we don't see what those effects are, like the butterfly effect, right? Like
Well, I want to let me do this because I know we did move around a little bit, but I want to go back to the dog story real quick here.
Yeah.
That was kind of like was that your, because sometimes, dude, you got to be honest, man. It's like, I'm thinking of spaghetti and now I just sit down in a big plate of spaghetti. What's happening? That would blow your mind. You know what I mean? So when you got home and discovered that your dog needed you, that had to blow your mind a little bit.
Big time. Yeah. And I needed a day to recover before we could even really get back to work. And my wife was on a road trip, so it was rough. But anyways, like that did kind of kick some things off. It got me thinking again about this whole thing. And honestly, at that point in life, I was partying a lot too. I wasn't very healthy. It was a bit of a wake up call in a lot of ways, as these kind of experiences with something beyond ourselves and bigger than ourselves can do to you. But again, it was another kind of 2 years, 2019, 2020, when all the lockdowns happened. That's when it really started to kick off for me. Because I quit drinking at that point, 95%, we'll say. And I did a lot of exercise, got myself in shape. I was working from home part-time because the economy was collapsing and all this stuff. And it gave me a lot of time to go down rabbit holes.
You know what? That's kind of funny, because what better time to learn remote viewing than during the damn lockdown?
That's right. I like to think that I'm kind of, me in the future is sending me all the instructions for the right timing to do all this stuff. I'm a big believer in retrocausality, because I've seen it in action in my own life a few times, and it's a useful thing to know about and use. That's really the basis of remote viewing, to a degree, or at least that's what a lot of people theorize. Is
this was a big spark, though, that you're like, wow, I experienced something crazy.
Yeah.
I've got to learn more about this. I've got to.
Yeah, and I got 2017 was also the year that the Tic Tac and the gimbal video and all that stuff came out. So I started following that stuff all again, and really, I've always felt that I was going to be, it was going to be in our lifetime that we see disclosure, and certainly right now it's looking pretty good.
Whenever, what's so crazy about right now is we've never in the history of our planet been this close. I mean, right now, yeah. Congressmen are talking about this, Congress, and it's just it's something that has been taken seriously. Finally, there's people who are taking this seriously, who have a platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's an interesting time to be alive. We may
100%.
We may learn some things about ourselves that we never knew, and that's what I'm hoping I get to witness.
Yeah.
Now with you, so back to the the lights that you saw. You don't necessarily think that was. I mean, you think there was like and I use the word paranormal, but
yeah,
in a lot of ways, paranormal is the normal. But it's just a word that I like to use to describe something unique, something special.
I think it was an intelligent energy of some kind.
Okay.
That certainly not human, but I think it was of nature.
But not necessarily UFOs. Not nothing.
Not anything I would say interplanetary. And certainly, no physical. We didn't see any physical craft or anything. Just these little orbs that would blip in and out of existence in between. You'd have a lightning flash, and then everything would brighten up, and you'd see the whole forest, and then it's dark again, but you see these little orbs kind of blipping, and
there was no trees. No psychedelics, no DMT, nothing.
No. This was sober day, and we had gone to sleep and woke up. Now we had just woken up from sleep, so it's quite possible we were kind of in a liminal state, where I find that that's kind of a state of mind where you can experience things sort of a little bit more in depth. So the other orb experience I had was, I've had a few now, but one of the other ones I've had was after being into remote viewing for quite some time, probably 2 years or so. And I decided to try out the CE5 protocol. Just essentially, not, I didn't sign up for the app or anything, but I kind of got the gist that it's, you meditate with the intention of connecting with benevolent, non-human intelligence.
The
right?
CE5 protocol.
That's the Stephen Greer thing. His contacting non-human intelligence with meditation thing. Being a remote viewer and a meditator, I just kind of, I like walking meditations. I like to walk in the woods with my current dog, and kind of spin the wheels,
God, I bet
and
that's awesome, dude. I bet
that's my favorite form of
I bet that
meditation.
is okay. Let me say some quick things real quick. First of all, I'm not very familiar with meditation. I did it one time. Well, I mean, I've tried and played around with stuff because to kind of, keep anxiety down. It's a healthy thing to do. I'm 100% believer in the benefits of it. But I will tell you this is why another reason when you're talking about what you guys experienced, out in the woods there, I'll never forget. I was doing meditation one time. I was in my room, home alone, practicing this, and I started to have an out of body experience, almost like just like how you would like on psychedelics, where you kind of let go of yourself and you're not in
Yeah.
control. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
That first, it's scary.
It's
It's a
weird.
little
Yeah.
scary at first to let go of the safety net, the raft, And I remember getting so deep in that state and letting go, and then I was like, "Holy shit! Holy shit! Holy shit!" And I came back,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I snapped out of it, and I was back here. I was like, "Holy hell!" That was like I was on some type of psychedelic, but I was just so deep in a trance on my own.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely possible, dead sober, to have those experiences. Absolutely. But now you said walking meditation. Now,
Yeah.
first of all, let's talk about some quick health benefits to that, because you're out in nature, you're moving around, but you're meditating at the same time.
Yeah. So it's meditation. There's kind of the classic sort of what I would call passive meditation, where you're trying to, not let the thoughts take you out of focusing on your breath or your heartbeat or whatever it is. And then there's active meditation, which is, you're getting your brain into the same sort of frequency band, which is usually like an alpha state. If you're drinking coffee, working, you're in a beta state. If you're watching TV, you're in alpha. If you're in a deep trance kind of meditation, you're down in theta. These are all just different frequency bands of your the frequency of your brain waves, essentially how close together those pulses are. And when you're in those lower frequencies of theta or delta is what you're in when you're in a deep sleep. That's down around 4 hertz.
Now, right here, my name is Ray has a little he's question here. He says, "Isn't remote viewing just your imagination at work?"
So the thing with imagination is you've got, with remote viewing, you're connecting to a target and you're trying to get into a meditative state by following these different parts of the process. You're trying to keep your right brain and your left brain kind of segregated. Your right brain is your creative brain. Your left brain is your logical brain. Yes. And your imagination is coming from the right brain for sure. And if your right brain, if you're jotting down your data in your session, you're trying to make sure that it's not imagination. That's something you have to fight against the whole time, actually. And fight is probably the wrong word, because the more you try to fight it, the worse it's going to be. It's really just better to relax and kind of let it flow and approach it all with from a place of curiosity. So imagination can derail your remote viewing session, actually, and part of the art of it, I think, is getting to a place where you can actively discern between what is data and what is imagination.
How do you tell, though? How do you figure that out?
So the way you do it, remote viewing was designed by the military, right? So back to my story, the thing that really pulled me into this world during the 2020 lockdown was finding this documentary, Third Eye Spies. I highly recommend that to anybody who's interested in the history of remote viewing. I'm not a history buff. I know.
Do you know where is it streaming? Is it?
It's on Amazon for sure. It was on YouTube. It might still be. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it's
Third Eye Spies.
Third Eye Spies. Yeah, it's straight from the physicist Russell Targ, who helped invent the laser, and later went on to help invent remote viewing.
Nice, very credible, smart people here, folks.
Totally, and Hal Puthoff, who's another who still does a lot of work for the U.S. government. He's been I think in the background doing a lot of stuff towards disclosure. He put out a paper on the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis last year, I think I saw. But the two of those guys and an artist by the name of Ingo Swann. Ingo was also a gifted psychic. It was those three and a number of others too, who sort of really brought remote viewing into existence in the form that it is. They developed the protocols that you follow, and remote viewing is different from just general kind of psychic work. It's a very specific protocol. You're following a step-by-step method. You're recording your data in certain ways to, again, kind of keep your left brain busy by following this structured process, so that your right brain can act as the receiver. Like you said, you're trying to receive that information, and it's coming through, and you're using your intention to sort of direct that process, but you're also keeping your left brain busy with that process of putting the data in the boxes and places where it needs to be. And you start with high level stuff. You start with, you just kind of draw like a flick of the wrist. It's called the ideogram. And essentially what that is a connection to your target. You write your target number, you do your ideogram, and boom, you've kind of opened the channel. And then from that point, you begin to look at sensory information. So you can kind of poke at your ideogram. Like I tend to think of the ideogram as like a holographic download of my session information that I'm trying, and then I'm just trying to decode that hologram the whole time. So your first step in that is to be like, okay, so what do I feel? What do I sense? What do I smell? Do I see any colors? And it's best to go through that systematically. You start with sight, and then you go on to sound, and then hearing, and are there textures that I can feel at this site? So, remote viewing is kind of a misnomer, because you're really using all of your senses ideally to get different information. So it's helpful to go through all of those senses. And then another one that you look at is sort of energy. Is there, temperature? What do I feel? Is there, some kind of energy source? Emotions then are kind of the last one that you do after the sensory information in that second stage, where how does this site make me feel? What are there any feelings at this site coming from the site itself, or anything that might be there? And you kind of it's not imagination, because you're kind of busy triggering yourself with these questions of what do I feel, what do I see, etc.
Okay, that's what I find that very interesting, because we've got these senses. We've talked about, you've heard things like the sixth sense, stuff like this. So there's a lot of senses that we're using here. I tell you, I want to come back to this because I love what we're great topic. But we've got a commercial break we need to get to real quick. After this commercial break, we're going to be right back with Josh Maitland. We're going to be talking about using our senses.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
It's your business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
All right, we are back here with Josh Maitland. Also, the note troll. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier there, but we were talking about our other senses. That this is how you could tell the difference between imagination and the remote viewing side when you're really connecting. Yeah. And I find that very interesting because I always talk about we have touch, smell. There's here, I know there's more senses. What is it? Taste, yep. Touch, smell, and the other senses that. But what you're talking about, it's almost like remote viewing uses all these together. There's a use for all of these. Yeah,
it's the way I see it is that and this is kind of debated, I think, in the remote viewing world. But a lot of people think you're kind of projecting out to the target. I think you're kind of more going in, through the heart portal, the heart chakra. I think that's kind of we sort of touched on heart math and stuff for a little moment there before, but the intuitive system is really your heart, your brain, and your gut. That's sort of where this stuff flows. And when you're in tune, in that kind of meditative heart space, that's when you get the best flow of information. So it's the sixth sense is a bit of a misnomer, I think, too. I think Ingo Swann once said there was something like 17 senses. because we can sense electromagnetic stuff, all kinds of weird things like that. But there's that sense of being stared at.
Absolutely. But something else I want to add real quick is I always bring this up. Okay, now we've got sight, we've got hearing, we've got taste, we've got touch, we've got these senses that we use, that we have evolved to use.
Yeah.
Based on our environment, based on what's around us. If the light didn't exist, we probably wouldn't have eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, there'd be no sense, no reason for it. Think about some of the things also that I always throw this out here. Think of the other things that do exist in the universe that we can't measure because we don't have the senses in order to be able to measure these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we don't know how to use the senses that we have in order to measure these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And with when you're doing remote viewing or other psychic stuff, you're kind of tapping the inner corollaries of those outer senses, I think. So for each outer sense, touch, taste, sight, smell, etc., you've got what's historically known as the clair senses. So clairvoyance would be that clear inner sight. Clairaudience is when you hear stuff inwardly and psychically. Clairgustance is when you taste it, and then there's other ones like claircognizance when you just know shit. That's the coolest one, actually. And then there's somatic, like clairsomatic senses, where you might have a feeling in your body or in a chakra or something like that, like an energy center in your body that would correlate to something. So maybe I'll be doing a remote viewing session, and I do a lot of sessions. Again, it's only a remote viewing if you're blind to the target, but I'll do sessions where I'll be trying to figure out some problem that I have, and the data that I'll get is a feeling in my solar plexus or something. So it's like, oh, so this is kind of telling me maybe I have to take action on something, or in my throat, it's maybe like, oh, I need to say something, and it's weird, man. Like I'll feel the stuff coming up in my throat, and then the words will come out, and I'll be like, oh, interesting, and then I'll write it down. But it's a weird process, man. Like it's a very individuated process too, not unlike a musician developing their own kind of signature style. I think remote viewers kind of do the same thing. It's very much an art.
Do you think it has? Okay, from my world, okay, I will stand on stage and I pretend to read someone's mind. I'm not reading their mind. It's a trick. Although I've studied cold reading, I've studied mentalism for 25 years. I use it in my act. We have fun. It is a trick. I'm not reading their minds. Now, and a lot of magicians from my background, a lot of them don't dismiss psychics completely altogether. The whole Uri Geller thing, they're like, oh, he's a fraud, blah, 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 blah.
He's a pretty good remote viewer, actually.
Well, absolutely. I've never written Uri off. I've never met him, but I've never written it off completely. Now, I am aware there are scammers out there that take advantage of people all the time.
100%.
I'll never forget one time after a show, I had this little old lady come up to me, and she was like, could you come back to my place and hypnotize me? I've lost jewelry and I need to find it. And I said, no, don't ever go up to a total stranger and do that ever again.
Yeah, right. Wow.
But, but I mean, but here's the thing, though. I do think, like I said, there are some very authentic, genuine people out there. But just like in every single thing, there is shysters. There are flim-flam scams. And maybe people who claim to have these abilities, but they just want to get into your pockets.
Yeah.
But the thing I like about you, Josh, once again, and this is the other thing, man, I think there needs to be more people like you heard on this topic, because, I mean, like I said, you bring science to it. You bring, look, this guy was smart. This guy was smart. Here's the, you know what you're talking about. You're just not.
I came in as a skeptic, honestly.
Yeah.
I watched Third Eye Spies, and I was fascinated, just seeing these scientists talk about this this process that they developed, and they go through and they talk about, you know, how the military used it to spy on the Russians, and how, and they give examples of some of the stuff they found. Like, it's all declassified now, so it's, anybody can look this up. But the Stargate project was, I believe, the first one. Again, I'm not the guy to talk to about remote viewing history. Anyone who's really interested in that, there's a guy named Daz Smith who has a great website. He's a world-class remote viewer. He's got lots of great stuff on the history of it on his website, which is remoteviewed.com with a D. Yeah, just even if you just Google Daz Smith remote viewing, you'll find him. But yeah, the history of it's fascinating, and just the idea that these guys took a scientific approach to psychic abilities and got a bunch of money to develop a program, and then they used it and they had all kinds of success. It was fascinating. And as the credits rolled on that documentary, I heard a voice in my head say, Google remote viewing courses. And it was loud as hell. It was my own voice in my head. It was the weirdest thing. So I was like, okay, well, there's another weird experience to add to the pile. I guess I'm going to check this out. And I found an online course from, you know, one of the kind of a second generation from the military program guy, and took his course. I ended up taking actually his intro course and then the intermediate and advanced, and I blasted through all of it. I loved it. It was fascinating because you know, the first target I tried, it was like a roller coaster was the target. I had no idea what it was going to be, right? Like, you don't know, it's blind. And I followed the process I learned in the first couple exercises of the class, and sure enough, I drew a roller coaster. I got these rails and the car and the colors, everything was on. The only thing I missed was it was actually a roller coaster that was going in through some water, and I didn't pick up the water element, which is weird because I'm a water engineer. But you know, it was a fascinating target, and so after that success, I kept going, and I kept hitting the targets, and you know, it was fascinating. You know, I think I spent probably most of 2021 and 22 doing a target almost every day, or
I can
more.
see how that could be addicting.
It
You know,
is.
I mean, it's like, whoa, you know, holy hell.
It's so cool. It feels really good when you hit it too, because it's like, holy shit, I just did that. Like, you know, it's this wild thing, and it blew my mind, and that sent me down further rabbit holes. You know, I went and I had to look up, you know, who are the people doing this in the world, and I found a whole community of people that do remote viewing. You know, there's a remote viewing subreddit and Discord. I did a podcast recently with some friends that are they have it's called the Psychic Guys podcast. It's a bunch of remote viewers and psychics that talk about their experiences doing remote viewing and psychic stuff. But yeah, it was great. So I spent that kind of 2-year period just jamming with people, you know, on targets. Someone would set a target up, and you know, we did one on. So there's this phenomenon where anybody that learns remote viewing pretty much tries to win the lottery with it, right? Like, why wouldn't you? And so many people, myself included, you know, you start on the pick 3 or the pick 4 or whatever, and I will just consistently get 2 out of 3, you know, and like I'm hit, and then that one that's off is off by exactly 1 or something like that. And it's the very first time I did it, I was using dowsing as opposed to remote viewing for this particular thing. But there is, you know, I woke up in the morning, I was in that liminal state, and I was like, okay, what are my numbers? And I ended up with like 359. And this was the first time I tried it. I didn't buy a ticket, checked it later that day. Sure enough, it was 359. And since then, anytime I buy the ticket, I'm off by 1 or whatever. It's weird. So one of the experiments we did over on the remote viewing Discord was, you know, one of the guys tasked us on why is it that remote viewers can't seem to win the lottery, and a bunch of different people did sessions. I've looked at all the data, but it really does seem like there's almost like an element of fate, or it's like your subconscious is looking out for you. Like if winning the lottery is going to screw up your life in some way, it's going to block you from that.
Because you had mentioned this earlier, and I'm a believer the way time works is, some people, when they think about time, like to think about point A to point B, but actually it's almost like the future, the past, and the present all exist at the same time.
Yep. That's kind of where I'm at with it. It's really hard to rectify that in our experience, but conceptually, that's what all the enlightened meditators and everybody say, right?
One thing I'm thinking is if you're not going to win the lottery, you're not going to win the lottery. If it hasn't happened, you're not going to be remote to view it.
Well, or maybe you will. I know some people have won pretty good sums of money. I've used it in sports bets and stuff from time to time. The thing is, if you're really this goes for all remote viewing, if you're really, really set on an outcome, you're going to push it away. And I did a 30-day trial over December, where I tried to do an associative remote viewing target every day, which is where you're basically you do a remote viewing session, and then you're shown 2 photos, and your goal was to pick the correct photo of those 2, but not the wrong one. And so it's kind of tough, but you can kind of use this to so you assign, say it's the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens, you assign one of those to each photo, and your tasking is which team will win the game tomorrow night or whatever. And so then you do your remote viewing session, and whatever photo you get supposedly represents the winning team. So it's, there's also elements of fate. It's nothing is set in stone. There's a whole team of people whose actions and everything else.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, in the future, there is that energy of, and this is kind of how I try to do these things now, is like I connect to like, what is the emotional energy of the fan base of whatever team, and then if it feels happy, it's like, okay, so that's the team that wins. But with associated remote viewing, I did this trial of 30 days of these targets. There's an app you can use called RV Tournament, and remote viewers kind of compete on this app to see who can nail the most targets. And I was doing really good. I got like halfway through, and I was in 4th place out of something like 700 people. And I was just crushing it. I think I was hitting like 73% of my targets or something.
Wow.
And like 60% is considered like pretty good. For that kind of stuff, because it's it's gambling, and it's stochastic, there's randomness in it, and you're not always going to get it, but you'll probably do better than chance. So then I was all hyper about it. I was like, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to win. I'm going to crush this. And as soon as my goal changed from having fun and learning and playing with this to winning, I had 7 rounds in a row where I completely screwed it up. and I did good sessions. I did good session work. Some of them weren't great, but the ones that were okay. But I was deflecting to the off target. So I'd get one of the photos, but it wasn't the right one anymore. So yeah, one of my sort of more enlightened buddies, I was like, what the hell's going on with this, man? What do you think? And he was like, you care too much. You care too much about the result, and because of that, you're screwing it up. You're too attached.
That's a real thing in a lot of areas too. By the way, I use that same statement on a lot of stuff. I want to say we got Ryan Stacy. Our very own Ryan Stacy. He says, "Is it remote viewing the present and not the future?"
So remote viewing can be used in. You can look at anything, past, present, future. There's you can look at different planets. You can look at different solar systems. Ingo Swann, for example, I think he relatively famously did a session in, I want to say, the 70s or 80s, and it was about one of the planets that they later discovered had rings around it, but didn't know at that time. So at the time of the session, he was like, yeah, this planet has rings. And a few years later, it came out that it did in fact have rings. I think I want to say it was Jupiter or something like that, or I'm terrible at astronomy, so
Jupiter does have a ring. It's got a very thin ring.
that's what it was then. Yeah, I think it was Jupiter. So yeah, it's really, there's no limitations in time or space or subject. Like you can, this is the thing that I think scares a lot of people about psychic things, is the implication is that there is really no such thing as a secret, that you could theoretically remote view anything. I mean, I've myself remote viewed UFOs and stuff, and
well, I just don't want you to know my internet search history. So that's
yeah, no, it's that's the thing too, though. Like who's gonna remote view that, right?
no remote.
You'd have to have a really good reason.
There we go.
But and I mean, I think it's a valid concern, but the thing of it is remote viewing was developed as spycraft by the military industrial complex. That's where it comes from.
I find that interesting, because the military has they so many things that they've got so much money that they can do anything they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, hey man, let's try this, let's try that. So in some ways it's got to be a fun job. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's reverse engineer this craft we got over here. This thing's been over here for years. Let's see if we can get it to work.
That would seem like a lot of fun.
Now, didn't you? Okay, so you had a situation. You talked about. You mentioned earlier the Tic Tac video. Did you do something remote viewing with that?
Yeah. So throughout sort of the course of my training over those years of COVID and stuff, I ended up doing a few blind targets that were related to UFO stuff. And one of those targets, again, completely blind, was the USS Nimitz Tic Tac event that, Commander David Fravor recently came out and gave testimony about in Congress in the States. So that was a really cool session. That was I just a caveat, if you're interested in remote viewing and perhaps even interested in doing UFOs as targets and things like that, I would not recommend starting with that.
So we're talking some heavy stuff here.
It's kind of an advanced target to do stuff like that. Same with like cryptids and because some of these non-physical phenomena, I'm guessing most of the people listening to this podcast are familiar with the notion of the hitchhiker effect. And for those who aren't, it's when you're having an experience with something kind of woo-woo, and it clings onto you a bit. And you can get that with remote viewing. Wow.
Well, now, okay, do you care to share your experience with that? I mean,
sure. Yeah. I mean, if you've kind of developed your skills a bit and a bit about like energetic protection and things like that, which really it's all intention. I use tuning forks to kind of get my brain tuned up and there's kind of little rituals you do. Everybody's got a different process for sort of the cool down pre-session, but it's it's best to sort of invoke some protection. One fairly prominent remote viewer and neuroscientist by the name of Julia Mossbridge. She's a friend of mine. She's a just fantastic human being in general. But she once told me a really cool thing that she does with remote viewing, where when she's doing a target and she kind of isn't sure if it'll be like a quote unquote safe target, something that isn't, it's just like a photo or whatever versus a UFO. If she wants to be careful, she will do the session intentionally within sort of this model of the universe within herself, within her own mind. And because it's within her own mind, nothing can be harmful there. And I thought that was a really cool idea.
I love that.
Yeah, like the possibilities are just insane with this stuff. Like it's such a fascinating field. But yeah, so one of the blind targets I did was the Tic Tac session, and we can go through it if you want.
Absolutely, man. Would love to. Would love to hear about it.
Yeah, if we, I think I sent it through to you guys. If you want to bring it up.
I tell you, here we go. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Go. Yeah. So I did this back in March 2022. So any red text on this session is or check marks and things like that. That's all stuff I did after the fact. One of the things you do with remote viewing, one of the critical element of remote viewing is the feedback process. So you've gone through, you've done your session, you've got all your sensory data, you've kind of broken that sensory data out into more concrete sort of combinations of things and started to figure out what they represent and all that. But after the session, what you get, you need to get feedback on the session. That sort of closes this time loop between when you start your session and when you figure out what it was you were trying to remote view. If you don't have, if there is no feedback, then it isn't technically a remote viewing session. It doesn't necessarily mean your information's wrong or that you were, did a crappy job or anything. But if you can't prove it, you can't prove it, right? Again, it was scientists who developed this with input from artists, and so they took that part of it very seriously. Remote viewing is a very small cross section of psychic stuff. Like it's just a very particular way of doing things, but it is an effective way. So the question came through earlier about imagination, right? So one of the tricks that you use to sort of ensure you're not imagining stuff is that as you're doing your session and you're doing your sensory information, sometimes it'll come through as a picture, right? Or a concept or something more complex. And as a general rule, if you get a sense of something you can name, like a noun, a place, a thing, you jot that down off in the AOL column, which AOL stands for analytical overlay. So that's when that left brain kind of gets free and says, "Oh, you got something red and it's round. Oh, it's an apple." So that's AOL. That's your imagination.
American Online.
Yeah. Not American Online. No. So that's sort of the thing. So that first page was sort of the that kind of high level sensory information. If you see there on the right hand side under the AOL column, the very first thing that came into my head was the Tic Tac UFO. So again, I didn't know I was doing a UFO session on this one. So this S1, that's the ideogram. You can see that kind of scribble there. And then S2, stage 2, that's when you do your sensory information. So, I got these, I didn't exactly organize it by, sense. I just kind of went with all the stuff that came through. But I had this image of a classic flying saucer in my head, this sense of something spinning or rotating. There's warmth. I heard this sound that was kind of like a magnetic sort of pulse. It's weird as I look at this data, it pulls me back into it. It's so weird how this stuff works. But I got a tip, that came into my head. I was completely on like, okay, this is something UFO related, right? So anyway, I kind of kept going through the session. I got this. I'd done sort of that first few stages where I kind of get the basics out, and then you kind of pick your key element of the target, and you call it X, and you say, okay, so let's now repeat that process, but just for the piece of this thing that I have designated as X. So again, X, I got this kind of drawing of something round, this feeling of like a flying saucer. And again, these little sketches and stuff are like, that's a flick of the wrist. I'm not thinking about what I'm drawing. It's almost like an automatic writing kind of thing. And so yeah, on this element of it, I started to get these ideas of like fractals, vibranium, which is, as you know, is like the metal from Black Panther, Marvel stuff. You know, these weird senses of weird metals and portals and distortion of the reality field. You know, so you know, from there you go into stage 4, which is sort of a matrix analysis where you can see these kind of jottings at the top of the page. The S is sensory information, dim is dimensions. So that's, you know, your shapes and things like that. AI is your aesthetic impression. So that's kind of like what's the emotions that you feel about this target. And I had a sense of peacefulness, but also awe and wonder at whatever it was I was perceiving. And you know, this sensory, I had this sense of energy, this sound that was kind of like chirping, like a high pitched cicada almost kind of weirdness. And then, you know, again, this emotional impacts, the EI, you know, felt like this high vibration, transitory kind of thing, super weird. But yeah, and then so you get to the end of that and you move on to the next element. So this one I called Y, and the first thing that came up with element Y was an aircraft carrier. And you can see I took a break there at 11:22 and, you know, resumed it a little later or whatever, because it's good to take breaks with this. Like,
so you record your breaks.
Like yeah, you record everything you do. Again, this is left over from the old military remote viewing process. Like the best thing you can do as a remote viewer is write down literally everything that you perceive, every little detail, because you never know which of those perceptions is going to be the important one, right? So again, yeah, I got all these weird colors and you know, weird portal-like space-time manipulation, like the feeling of it, like, which is really hard to describe, right? It's so weird when you do these kind of targets, because I wrote square wave function at the bottom. I don't even know what that means. That just kind of came into my head. And you know, this idea of like pinging back and forth between dimensions or times relative to now, like it was almost like radio TV static but colorful. You know, I think this was more to do with kind of the one of the AOLs. I wrote the silence between the notes, which in music is a really powerful thing. You know, if you've ever listened to Pink Floyd, you'd probably be familiar with that concept. But yeah, so page 6 here, AOL third wave. At this point, I saw like a tall white ET with black eyes. This was, now I didn't get the impression that was at the target. That was, I think, more just my mind kind of saying, this is some alien shit. Like this is not normal stuff. And so then here I do, on this page, I do something interesting. So this is called a merge command. So this is where you essentially merge your energy with the energy of whatever your target is, and you kind of feel what it feels. And so I tried to merge. I got this sense of like intelligence or life within this UFO. And so I was like, all right, let's merge with this life, which, you know, is kind of I guess a little bit of a bold thing to do when you're dealing with UFOs. But I really got the sense that it wasn't alive. I got the sense that the Tic Tac, whatever it was more of an AI or like a drone. It was intelligent. I felt it was intelligently controlled. But so we'll read through this site summary. So this is the final page. So once you kind of pull together all these bits and pieces of the puzzle in a remote viewing session, your final task is to do your summary page. So here's what I wrote. So again, I was still completely blind to what my target was, but I wrote that it was an object that is controlled by an intelligence. The object is round or curved. It's moving through space/time via an energy field which fluctuates and feels interesting, hard to describe. Humans are witnessing this object from a man-made structure. I have a sense that the ocean is nearby or the main location for this interaction. The human element feels military. The object feels non-military, intelligently controlled, but not necessarily by a local consciousness, like a drone. A sense of watching over and playfulness. And higher consciousness permeates the object. And so I drew this little UFO with, some kind of protrusion on the top of it. There was an energy field around it. There was some kind of magnetic field. Again, who knows, right? But that was kind of the gist of what I was sensing there. I got this song, Cubically Contained, went into my head, which is a song by the Headstones. Great Canadian punk rock band. But yeah, it was a really cool session, and that's my take on the Tic Tac. So after I finished that session, it was an online target, so I clicked the link for what the feedback was, and sure enough, it was the video of the USS Nimitz event, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like, what the shit!" Like, it was really cool, and the fact that I named it on the first page, I was just like, "Whoa!" So I shared it with all my remote viewing friends right away because I was all stoked about it.
That is so awesome, dude. And you didn't pick up no negative feelings towards this object, correct?
I didn't. I know other people who have run the target that have.
Nope.
And
bad intentions. Nope, nothing.
One thing that was weird that came up too was I think I wrote. I'm not sure what page it was, but I'm pretty sure I wrote that I got this feeling of it being ancient, like not futuristic like you might expect, but ancient. Yeah. And I just thought that was kind of weird. And I forget what I was watching something recently. It was a documentary or something like that, one of these UFO documentaries or something. And somebody kind of came out with maybe it was even just another remote viewer, I can't remember, but somebody else kind of came out and said, they got a sense from one of these objects that it was ancient, like it was something from not only it was ancient, but it was also futuristic at the same time. Like somehow it's both. So maybe it just exists outside of time, or maybe that's speaking to the fact that these things can apparently move outside of time or zip around in weird ways. Like I remember that hearing again the David Fravor story that this object knew where their next meeting point was, and after Absolutely. It disappeared, they flew to their next point, and boom, it was there again, waiting for them.
There's theories out there, and and this is not mine, but and I cannot remember this guy's name, so I will jack it up. But basically, he threw the theory that these beings, their whole existence is they travel, and they meet up in places in time. And just like to where you've seen the ancient paintings where you've seen UFOs in the background, that's just a moment in time to where they were, So they're popping up in all these different random moments in time, and we just happen to, we see it this time, So they've kind of been here for forever. Doing these things, and also the way time works, like how we were talking, the past, present, and the future all existing at the same time. Mm-hmm. It gets really interesting, really deep, and I think that was amazing what you just explained. Now let's do this because we're getting a little close here. On wrapping up. So, but before we get out of here, this is something I really want you to talk about. Is like you teach people to do this.
I do, yeah. I dropped my first remote viewing course last year. My website is rockstarintuition.com. And I got the first couple of chapters up there for free. You can check it out.
Well, but most people would think most people walk around just like anything, I have to be, it's a gift. I have to be born with this gift.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
A fairy has to come and shit on my forehead and these powers.
That's a really, that's a myth that I'd like to bust. And there are other people out there trying to bust that myth, but it really is a very natural human faculty. There's stories of mystics and everything all through history, right? at the root of it, though, psychic ability is intuition. We all have intuition to some degree or another. But the thing that is, kind of mind blowing to me, and that kind of set me on this path, was discovering that you can train your intuition just like a muscle, and creativity does that, I think, by default, playing music, making art, any of that kind of stuff. But remote viewing is basically like the strength training of that to me. That's what, like, I try to do a session every week if I can, like to good depth, or I'll do 30 days in a row where I'll do a session every day, and then I'll take a break for a couple weeks. I'm actually on one of those breaks right now, but it's great training. It opens up your intuition, and once you start doing that, the real benefit here isn't the ability to see UFOs through space or time or whatever. The real benefit, I think, of remote viewing is opening up that intuition, because once your intuition is functioning, that means that you have a good relationship with your subconscious. And I think a huge amount of the problems that people have, myself included, 100%, is buried subconscious shit that you're not aware of, that's triggering you. If you're getting triggered by something, that's your subconscious. That's something that is creating an emotional resonance that is negative. Yeah. And so when you start to do this practice, like, it's basically just a jam session with your own subconscious, and every remote viewing session that you ever do, especially if you approach it with that goal, it's going to be, it's therapeutic as hell. Like, it's again, it's just like playing music. Music is my therapy. I get on stage and rock out so that I can process my anger and grumpiness. It's one of those. It's the creative process, man. It's a thing that you can tap into to feel good and make your life better. But that's, I think, the biggest benefit of RV.
I think this is, first of all, man, I'll be honest with you, I came in, I've heard about remote viewing, I've picked up on things, but you have made me very interested in this topic,
Right on.
Really, you've made me very interested, because I'm on board with the consciousness stuff. I'm on board with all this. And I think, and it's very interesting, especially with the TikTok thing. I think that's freaking crazy.
Yeah, I got a Tic Tac right here, actually.
There we go. But I tell you what. So before we get out of here, though, I want to let the viewers know, how can they learn more about Josh Maitland, the Note Troll? Which, by the way, why do they call you that? Why do they call you the Note Troll? So
that's my music stage name. So that's kind of just speaks to my style, where I troll for notes. Like, it's a fishing reference.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
I dig them out. I pull them out right at the right time. Well, and I do the same with psychic information from the quantum field too.
So where can people go to learn from Josh Maitland? Where can we learn more about you? Let the viewers know.
So I got a band called Glacial Erratic. We got a single coming out on Valentine's Day. Also World Sound Healing Day, oddly enough. So we're dropping that in February. Glacial Erratic, we're a Canadian musical comedy act. It's we're all about raising vibes. And then on the intuition side of things, remote viewing, rockstarintuition.com. And the first couple chapters are about sort of this higher level science of consciousness stuff, where I go into holographic universe theory and some of the theories behind remote viewing, as well as the history and the basics of it. And even if you just check out you have to plug your email in. But if you check out the free stuff, I think there is a target you can do. If you want feedback, you gotta buy the course. But it's you can try it out. And obviously there's free targets everywhere. If you want to kind of get a primer and check out the basics of what it is and what I think, anyway, from my research and work is sort of the best guess at the science behind why and how this works. It's all on the website there too.
Awesome. Well, Josh, man, this has been amazing, dude. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot, and I hope the viewers have learned a lot.
I hope so too.
Man, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, man. Thank you.
Yeah, honored to be here. You guys are doing good work. Like this stuff is real. People have these experiences, and I personally think remote viewing is going to be important moving forward, and all kinds of intuition and psychic stuff to helping understand these experiences that so many people are having in the world.
Awesome. Once again, brother, thank you so much for coming on, man. You were great.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
I tell you what, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and watching tonight's episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Like I said, you can check out Josh Maitland at his website, all the information. You can learn how to do remote viewing yourself. If you guys have not done so, be sure to subscribe to this podcast show wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't yet. We got some amazing guests coming up the next few weeks. Next week, we've got Dr. Sigmund. He's a neurosurgeon, and he's got an awesome book, and he believes in the paranormal and the whole conscious thing. So that's going to be an interesting conversation we're going to have next week. But once again, I'm Danny Whitson. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Peace, my paranormal junkies.
All right, that does it for this episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. A big shout out for tonight's awesome guest, and a bigger shout out for everyone who tuned in. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. And like always, be sure to stay curious, heed the world, and keep the paranormal normal. I'm your host, Danny Whitson, and this has been Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
All right, we're back here with we've got a 5-minute chat we're going to do here. Here we go, sir.
Yeah. Hey, we can, say hi to the guests, stuff like that. I want to, thank everyone for coming in and enjoying the show.
What a great episode. What an awesome a topic that, remote viewing, a lot of times when you hear it, a lot of people immediately go to crackpot central, this is not real, whatever. And then somebody like Josh comes on who intelligent, talks about the scientific part of it, and some very smart people. And I I'm interested now. I want to know more about it.
Yeah. Ryan did say something earlier, and we couldn't get it on the show, but he did say, my wife, aka my boss, says walking your dog is like walking with God.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one.
I think the cool thing. I never had looked at it like this before, but like I said, I'm a big fan with consciousness of how you put these things out in the world, out in the universe, good positive thoughts, and how you can also bring other things in. And like I said, talking with Josh tonight, just it seems like all that connects. So but yeah, man, a great episode, a really good episode.
All right, there's a new comment. Hold on 1 second. Oh, everyone's saying hi to me. Hi, everybody. Usually I don't come on, but I guess I'm gonna start doing this. But yeah, no, if you wanna end the show now, we can start doing that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, do we have any questions? Anything want to pop up? I can answer a quick question real quick before we get out of here. Like I said, I hope you guys did enjoy tonight's episode. If and if you get a chance, you definitely want to tune in for next week. I'm really excited about our guest next week. Dr. Sigmund. He's a neurosurgeon, and he's had some paranormal experiences. I can't wait to talk to him about that. I can't wait. I think things are very connected with our thoughts and our brain and our senses. And I think we're just going to have some great conversations with this guy. If you guys did watch tonight's episode, earlier in the episode, I mentioned to Josh about how our loved ones or people, from the other side who have passed on, that's communicate with us, kind of psychically, if you've ever had a grandparent that's passed away and you feel like your grandparent was talking to you somehow. So these are some things that I can't wait to have a conversation with Dr. Sidmig next week. So, but definitely, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode. It was great. I learned a lot about remote viewing. I'm going to check out, do some research myself, try to learn some more about it, and definitely check out Josh's website to if you want to learn how to do it. And once again, thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you guys back next week.